Thank you, and welcome to the all-men's panel. I always say beyond the imperative, the moral imperative of equality and ensuring everyone has their fair shake in terms of pursuing whatever ambitions they have, that there's a very strong business case to be had for diversity in business and around the boardroom table in order to really galvanize creativity and amazing results. Study after study has shown that. But in both of these complementary contexts, it gives me really great pleasure to moderate this esteemed panel of absolutely amazing humans. And I'm going to turn it over to each and every one of them to give a brief intro and also describe why, for them, championing this issue of the advancement of women in business and in tech is so important to them. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Garrick.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. I'm Garrick Tiplady. I run Facebook and Instagram here in Canada. And I just have to say, so first of all, Jody, who I know is in the front, thank you for having this panel. I think it's important we talk about this. I'm a champion of this movement. I think it's fantastic, so thank you. And to your point on gender equality and inclusion, honestly, I just think you have to look at the Canadian population. Over 50% of the population is women. Over 25% of the population identify as visible minorities. It is up to us to make sure we champion inclusion because we would be fools not to.
Awesome. Hi there, everybody. My name is Zaib Shaikh. I'm Canada's Consul General to Los Angeles, Southern California, Nevada, and Arizona. And a big shout out to everyone here. And of course, Jody and the Move the Dial team, because this is an integral conversation. We're so lucky to have it in one of the greatest cities in the world. And thanks for letting me be on this mantle, as we said, backstage. Normally, I say I'm going to be off the mantle, but to this group, I think we really want to talk about something from our government says none of us can move forward if half of us are held back. And I think that's an important way to look at it. Why is it important? Because of that very nature, that we are nowhere if we're holding people back. And currently, in spite of amazing moments like this, we still are. And it's because of amazing moments like this that hopefully we will get over that hump. And Canada is committed to that. And hopefully we'll do it together.
Paul?
Paul Desmarais.
But
There we go. Oh, you know what? If I just grab that. Do it. Okay, that's easier. Paul Desmarais. I'm the chairman and CEO of Sagard Holdings. We're an investment organization. I'm the co-founder and chairman of Portage, a venture fund, and Diagram, a startup studio. I'm also the chairman of Wealthsimple. Ultimately, our organization is an investment organization. To succeed in that space, we need talent and a diversity of opinions. Ultimately, by having a diverse workforce and diverse team, we're able to draw from a much deeper pool of talent and then have people that are able to bring us different perspectives and different angles and avoid groupthink. And so all of that makes for diversity as a really important factor in our competitive advantage.
They gave me on my own. I'm lucky. I'm Dave Patchell-Evans. Everyone calls me Patch. I'm the CEO of GoodLife Fitness, Fit for Less, Econo Fitness, Can't Fit Pro, and Oxygen Fitness. And those companies are all run by women. And our board is, our senior executive team is heavily weighted towards women. And I really think that's why we're so successful. Well, actually, I don't think I know. That's why we're so successful. And they provide the level of professionalism with the level of empathy that is required to make people feel that we can trust them with their health and their fitness and their well-being. And that's our purpose.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. Maybe I'll start with Zaib for my first question. Tell us about a time, Zaib, that you witnessed or learned of a situation where you would have wanted to do more for a woman in the workplace. What did you learn from that, and how has this changed the way you offer support as an ally?
Deep cuts. Well, I'm from the media and entertainment world, and I started in the theater world, so let me assure you, the Time's Up and Me Too movements I have unfortunately seen in full effect, and I'm embarrassed to say that Likely because of my inaction in moments, I probably was, not probably, was, a co-conspirator because of my silence or because of my confusion. I can remember first time in theater school where a male visiting prof, through rehearsal, sure, we were talking about the scene, and it's a deep scene, and things are happening, and things are getting volatile in the scene, but the male director decided to single out one of the lead actors and to, I guess, provoke her into a moment to get really connected, like just out of the blue, just threw water right into her face. And it resonates still because in that moment it was awkward and weird. And then as you go through your life and start becoming a better person, hopefully, a better man, you realize how horrific that was. And maybe if you'd done that, stopped it there or countered it or called it out, that could have been your moment to actually grow faster, sooner, wiser. And I didn't, so it took me a longer time. But I'm proud to say that I did realize from that, and that's always, and that person eventually actually got called out for it. Not that moment, but because unchecked, went on to do some other things, and now they are no longer in the industry, thankfully.
Thank you. Patch, as someone who's grown and risen through the ranks of the corporate world and the business world, what have some of your learnings been, and how could you, looking back, be as good an ally as you possibly can for women in the workplace?
When I see people look at people based on something other than being human, I see two things. One, their mistake and my opportunity. So if you're not going to treat everyone equally, that's okay. There's a lot of talent out there, and I'm going to bring them over to me. And so I can't force other people to do the things they should do, but I can set an example. So I try to set an example, and I speak out about it when I can. And sometimes it puts you in direct conflict, and I'm getting older, and I just don't care if I'm in conflict. It's like I'm just resigning from a board down in the States where they just won't put women on, so see you later. And and it's not just because it's the right thing to do, it's also the smart thing to do. And it's the caring thing to do. And and I always put myself in the shoes of anyone else who isn't put, I'm a big white male. So I have all these advantages. So I try to put myself in someone else's shoes, and how would I want to be treated? And I have a special needs daughter. She has severe autism. And I know what it's like to be pushed over and have people look at me differently. And she's opened up a world to me of things that didn't occur to me. And so I'm thankful for that, and I'm thankful for this opportunity for us all to share.
Fantastic. Well, that's great. Speaking of leading by example, as leaders within your organizations, what are ways that you've actively supported women on your team? What's one tangible thing that the other allies and champions who are listening today can start doing right now to support the women around them? I'll start with Garrick on this one.
So it's interesting. As I think back on my career, 7 of 8 of my managers have been women. And so, first of all, that is fantastic. And what I think it's done is it's given me more appreciation for some of the challenges that women face in the workplace on a day-to-day basis. And honestly, it's the start to actually talking about unconscious bias. And at Facebook, we talk a lot about unconscious bias. And the fact is, I think a lot of people, most people, show up to work every single day with positive intent. But we have bias that slips into conversations. We have bias that slips into how we interact with people. And we've got to address it and see it so that we can call it out. And so we've created training courses at Facebook that we expect every employee to take. We've now made that available online for anyone who is interested, but it's really providing tools to spot, identify, and act on unconscious bias. So that's one thing. I think the other piece, just that we can all do, call out stereotypes when you see them. Just do it. Secondly, interrupt the interrupters. Nobody wants an interrupter in the room. Interrupt the interrupters. Champion women within your organization. Encourage women to go for it. And that's really how we try and show up every day. Now here's my one other piece. How many men in the audience? It's hard to see from here. Can you raise your hands? Okay, so here's my advice for you. Step up and mentor women. And I gotta say this because in discussions with people, and since the era of the Me Too movement, I've had a lot of conversations with men, and there is a fear that they stop interacting and stop mentoring women, and quite honestly, let me put a point in that right now, that is bullshit. Step up, mentor women, it is your job and responsibility.
Well said, well said. Paul, what's your perspective?
It's interesting because a lot of your comments resounded with me. Early on in my career, a lot of my bosses were women, and they were all very inspiring. And then I actually moved out of the professional services world and moved into the mining world at first, and all of a sudden, I ended up in an organization where the top 40 were men, and there were literally no women. And I'm actually now vice chairman of this mining company and working on changing that. But ultimately, when I've looked to build our own organization, we've taken an approach of hiring senior women right off the bat. In investment organizations, only a quarter of investment organizations have women that have check writing ability. Mm-hmm. Our venture fund, 30% of the partners are women. A private equity fund that we're launching in Paris right now, 50% of the partners will be women. That is very unique in the investment world. Ultimately, one of the things that I've found is that you have gender biases just naturally when you're building your business, and I think you have to approach diversity with real intentionality. Mm-hmm. And so I'll give you 3 examples of how that's played out just in the last 24 months. Last June, we organized what we call an ecosystem conference, where we invite our entire network to benefit from the group of people in the ecosystem that we've built. I put together the guest list, sent out the invitation, found that out of 200 guests, I had 180 men. And quickly realized, wow, this is a little out of balance. And you quickly realize that it's because, your network as a man tends to naturally lean towards men. And so what I did to fix that is I got the lists of all the top women in different industries in Canada, and I invited all of them off of LinkedIn to come, even though I'd never interacted with a lot of them before. And what's surprising is a lot of them actually came.
Fantastic.
Other intentionality is that as an organization, you don't realize that some of the things you do are very gender biased. So just next week, I'm organizing a 3-day offsite. The problem with a 3-day offsite is a lot of the women in our organization are caregivers, have families at home. Taking 3 days off from their family to be at an offsite is not really necessarily what they can do and what they could afford to do. And what was interesting is I actually had a woman in our organization take me aside and be, Paul, you do realize that you're asking all these women to take 3 days away from their kids, and that's all fine for you guys who are partners and can afford staff, but for a lot of the women in the organization, they don't have an army that works for them at home. And so I thought that intentionality is interesting, and just continuously refining that is key across everything we do.
Just to follow, it speaks to you that you listened to a woman. She gave you advice, you took it. That's key. When you get advice, take it.
It reminds me, it kind of comes full circle, the first annual Move the Dial Global Summit last year. Zaib's better half, Kirstine, was moderating a panel on ethics and technology, which I sat on. So it's in that sense a real pleasure.
I take her advice all the time.
We all take our mother's advice.
Yeah. Well, in closing, and on the theme of intentionality, I wanted to go in order and ask each of you really briefly if there's a particular author or speaker or influencer who has been particularly impactful to you as you have become such great allies in really the fight for equality and giving everyone their fair shake, as I talked about earlier.
All right, I'm excited about this. So this one for me is really, really easy, and we don't have to look beyond this room. Jody Kovitz, author, speaker, inspiration. So let me just say, Jody has been a personal inspiration to me. When I think around our relationship, she has challenged me. She has actively encouraged me to speak up. And Jody, with your voice and your platform and what you are doing with Move the Dial, you are an inspiration, so thank you.
I'm going to have to give it up. Author, influencer, speaker, Kirsten Stewart happens to be my wife, but also in absentia here. What we've learned from each other, actually, is I'm a person of color. She's a woman. Together, we've learned that a person of color has a huge amount of barriers and biases towards them, and clearly a woman has huge amounts of biases towards them. And so we always say, can you imagine how horrible it is for a woman of color? Because at the end of the day, that's, if you've got a color being the barrier 100%. And then your gender being the barrier, and so hopefully we both learn from each other, but really she's my inspiration and has made me a better man.
I would say my mother. My mother has always been an entrepreneur. From a young age, she set the example. Actually, was more of a role model in my life than a lot of my other relatives. And so that's played a big influence. As a recent client of Jody's, I just received the first draft of the survey that they did on my organization on diversity in my organization, and I could say that it is really interesting to dig into that, and so I'm really excited to be working with the organization more.
Fantastic.
I would like everyone to think about it forward, and I'll use my example as my grandmother was just being honored with one of the 100 most influential women in Milton, Ontario, because she wrote for a newspaper 100 years ago for 60 years. My mother's just turning 60, and she raised 3 sons because my dad died at a young age. So I had these strong women in my life. Because I had these strong women in my life, I was attracted to a strong woman as my wife, who is Silken Lama. And so what you're doing right now is you help men understand that strength builds their own strength and their own success. We will go forward getting better and better. You know, so we can take the tech industry, we can take all industries and make it enriched for both sexes. So no one talks about gender, everyone talks about equality.
Well, thanks, guys. Really enjoyed it, and hopefully you were all inspired. I certainly was. Thanks, man.
That was awesome.